Hello, Steve. Thank you for joining our podcast. Steve is a co-founder, is it,
Right.
of the Logic app. And Steve, could we start from the beginning? How did you come up with the idea? And yeah, first,
Sure.
when
Sure.
and how?
Thank you, Igor. Happy to be here. Yeah, so Logic actually started before, Logic is my third startup. And before starting Logic, I had spent a number of years at Brex, which is like banking for startups and businesses. And prior to Brex, I was at a company called Convoy that was in freight logistics. So kind of like an Uber for trucking. And at both of those companies, we had these massive operations teams that would, we had shipper operations and carrier operations or fraud ops and customer ops. And one of the constant things that I saw these teams struggling with was how to get good internal tooling. And we might give them something like Retool or Zapier and say like, hey, you can build your own tools, or we might give them some engineering resources to help build custom internal tooling. But it was always kind of a struggle. And the one thing that I saw was all of these teams always had standard operating procedures. So these like super thorough, long documents that prescribed exactly, how to think about certain problems or how to answer certain problems. And so Logic was really a thought experiment. If we take that SOP and give it to an LLM, can we augment the process? Can we fully automate the process? How far can we take it? And what do we need to build to get everybody in the company comfortable with that? Because in this new world where the SOP is the entire automation, then that means your ops team can just edit a document and maybe change how your critical path works. And so how do we get engineering comfortable with that? How do we get everybody else comfortable with that? So we also, when you give us an SOP, we'll generate test cases, we'll do versioning and approval chains. We keep an execution history. If you make a mistake, we have one-click rollback. So we kind of built all this structure to make it really easy to allow anybody in your company to own this automation.
Okay. Really, really interesting idea. And so your main clients, I think, are big businesses.
Well, it's actually a lot of our clients are relatively small, like Series A to Series C startups that are growing quickly, but want to minimize headcount. So like before they hire somebody, they want to make sure they've automated everything they can in that role before they hire another person.
If we are speaking about any concrete example for our audience, so what did you do without names of the company? Just we
Sure.
this, we did this, yeah.
Yeah, and we actually just published a case study with one of our first customers, and so I'm happy to name them. They're Garmentory. They are an e-commerce marketplace. So they work with fashion boutiques and fashion designers. They sell that inventory online, and because they import inventory from a bunch of different designers and a bunch of different fashion boutiques, the inventory is highly non-standard in terms of like descriptions are very different. Colors, sizes, everything's non-standard. Sometimes the descriptions will have phone numbers in them that have nothing to do with Garmentory or maybe return policies. And for a decade, for 10 years, they had 4 contractors on staff that would moderate every single item that went live on the store. And actually last Black Friday, almost exactly a year ago, they had a backlog of about 14,000 items that needed to go live. And their contractors could only do 2,000 a day, and there wasn't enough time to get through the backlog. So they gave us their SOP, this 24-page SOP that walks through exactly how they want products on their website, gave it to Logic. Logic turns that SOP into an API, a well-typed REST API that you can just send data to and get data back. And so we gave them an API where they send us an unmoderated product, we send them back a moderated product, and we chewed through their backlog. And we did such a good job of it that we actually wound up taking over the entire inventory moderation pipeline by January. So about 8 weeks later, we were doing 100% of their product moderation. And this entire year, we've done it for them. And so they call us a couple 100,000 times every single month. And so that's an example of something a team would use us for.
Thank you very much. And is your product, let's name it is a product, is your product usually somehow customized for the clients. I mean, I saw that you also integrated into the existing automated processes, and it's just an augmentation of the automated decisions and so on. So, is it somehow standardized? So you have an API, and the user has an opportunity just to send the request and give an answer, like in ChatGPT, or your product is usually customized solution for the user, for the client, for every client.
No, so I'd say closer to ChatGPT in that we built kind of a horizontal platform that should be able to take most SOPs or most business processes, as long as you're, if you're dealing with kind of your standard kinds of data and like images and PDFs, and if your process involves a human kind of reading, maybe reflecting on and making a decision about a piece of data or extracting data, from an image or something, those are the kinds of processes that are our bread and butter. It's industry agnostic. So all you do, you write the description, the process that you want us to do, and then we actually once you save that in our system, we kick off about 25 agents behind the scenes that do a whole bunch of things. It breaks that process apart into the inputs and outputs. It generates schemas, like we generate well-typed schemas that then get turned into a REST API. We generate test cases. We generate a whole bunch of things behind the scenes to make the SOP work really well.
I read it. I saw the example, the description on your website, but it is great to hear from you.
And one of the unique things is like a lot of automation tools kind of want you to move your entire workflow into their system. We actually take the opposite approach. We just want to own the decision. So like we want to receive data, do something with it, and then send you a conclusion back, and then make it super easy to embed that wherever you're doing work today. So if you have an N8N workflow or a Clay workflow, or if you have an engineered system, we just give you a REST API. So anything that can make an HTTP post call can embed logic. And so we make it really easy to take this brain and then embed it wherever you want.
Got it. Thank you very much. What have been the biggest challenge for you so far, whether it was technical or market related or organizational?
Yeah, there have been a million challenges. And I think the challenges that organizations will deal with LLMs, especially if you're building something in-house, vary a lot based on the scale. Like when I was at Brex, we had about 600 engineers. And so one of the big challenges there was making sure we give you guidance to the entire engineering team on how to make sure that you're not accidentally leaking data. So you don't want secrets in your context, and you don't want to necessarily fine tune on customer data. Some of those lessons we did bring forward to Logic. So we actually have a no fine tuning policy. All of 100% of our LLM calls are done through in-context learning and context engineering. That one of the nice consequence of that is we never train on customer data. And so in order to improve, and like, it's just nice to be able to go to a customer and say, we never train on your data. There's no exceptions. It's just, we never train on it. And so that means to make improvements to the system, we need to rely on context engineering. And that could be various prompt techniques. It could be a few shot examples. It could be routing to the right model. And a lot of the effort that we put into Logic kind of fits into a bunch of those buckets. So when you give us a process, we actually map that to one of a dozen models based on how important speed is. So like if latency is very important to you, we'll route to certain families of models. If the complexity of the task is very high, we'll route to a certain class of models. And each of those models will have different capabilities. And so doing good, reliable routing was tricky. And we actually spent a lot of effort. When you change your SOP, we also update all of the artifacts. So we update the schema, we also generate a user interface in the web browser, we update the user interface, and making sure that over time, those things are stable. So we'll never regress. We won't break your API on you. unless you're really, really explicit about it and make it super clear that you want us to break your API. And so kind of guiding the LLM to make sure as your process evolves, we never break your critical path. That's we put a lot of effort into that, and we have a whole bunch of tricks that I'd be happy to get into. But yeah, those are some of the things that are top of mind for us.
Okay, thank you. What main features does your platform support today, and what are you planning next?
Yeah, so today we, anything that an LLM can kind of do natively in terms of reading data, thinking about, reasoning about it, and kind of using common sense to come to conclusions. That's kind of where we started, and then we added support for multimedia, so images and PDFs. We're about to launch support for audio, and then we have some tools. So we have a dedicated kind of suite of tools for working with images. We have a couple customers that do a lot of image related things, and so detecting objects and images, drawing boxes, bounding boxes on items and images. We have kind of custom tools for that, and then we have a whole slew of customers that use us for research tasks, and so we have a suite of tools, like things like basic web search and deep research, but we integrate with Perplexity, we integrate with Exa, and sometimes we use a model's native search abilities depending on the task. And so those are the kinds of things we excel at today. We are working on MCP support, so both making Logic an MCP server, so every document you have in Logic becomes an MCP tool, but also allowing you to add an MCP server to Logic so we can call out to that. And that'll be really nice. So like if a team has an MCP server for like an internal API or something, you'll be able to just give it to Logic and we'll be able to call that for you.
Okay, thank you. How do you see the future of workflow automation and decision automation tools evolving? What are the major trends in your view?
Yeah, that's a good question. Certainly the capabilities of the models will keep improving. There's a saying that today's the worst it'll ever be, because it's only going to get better. One of the kind of extrapolating, one of the things that we saw, a year ago, we would advise customers that if a human is looking at a piece of data and making a decision within 2 seconds, we can probably fully automate that. These days, a year later, we give guidance that it's about 30 seconds. So anything that a human is, if you have a recurring decision that you have a team making over and over again, and they're spending 30 seconds or less on that decision, it can absolutely be automated today. And so I suspect looking forward another year, I suspect the decisions will become substantially more complex, multi-minute, deep decisions. And today we can do those things. Like if you hop into ChatGPT and you do deep research and you're sitting with the LLM, you can certainly do very complex decisions when you're in the loop. But once you remove the human from the loop, making LLMs reliable and consistent is 2 orders of magnitude more challenging. But I think as models improve, the complexity of the decisions will improve. But very much like with software engineering, where a year ago agentic coding would basically autocomplete the end of your line. It might write a few lines of code, but now you can give it a feature, and agentic coders can do tasks that might require hours of an engineer's time.
Okay, thank you. And speaking about AI automation, how do you ensure quality, reliability, automated decisions?
Yeah, that's one of the tricky things we invested a lot in. So when you're working on your process, when you're giving us that document, we automatically generate synthetic tests for you. And so that's kind of the first stage. And our test case generator will try to find parts of your document that are maybe underspecified or ambiguous, and it will come up with test cases. Like if your process involves maybe redacting phone numbers from a piece of text or any kind of personally identifiable information, the test cases will probably have content with phone numbers in it that are in a funny format, or maybe an email address that's in a weird format. And so the first thing we do is test cases. And then once we get historical data from you, so we keep a historical log of everything you send through our system, you can actually turn those into test cases as well. And we don't expose this to users today. We're still working on the user interface, but we'll also do regression testing against your historical test cases. And because all of these are being ran by an LLM, everything is generally fuzzy because, you know, if you ask an LLM to write an email, it might write 2 different emails, but both emails could be correct. They might just have subtle changes. So you can't necessarily do exact matches. There are scenarios where if you're classifying something, you want an exact match, and we handle that. But a lot of the times the evals are fuzzy. And then, so that helps give you confidence that as you're evolving the process, things won't break. But then once it's in production, you do want a level of consistency between decisions. You know, if an LLM makes a decision on a piece of data today, and then it sees the same piece of data tomorrow or a similar piece of data, you want it to make a very similar decision. And this is like important in the product moderation scenario that I talked about earlier with Garmentory. You know, they want consistency across the entire site. They have hundreds of thousands of products. So you need this consistency. And so what we actually do there is every time we get an input, like every time you call our system, we semantically index that input. And then when we see a new input from you, we'll retrieve semantically similar historical examples that we've seen. And we'll actually provide those to the LLM and say, like, hey, you've seen similar problems like this before. Here's what you did last time. Here's a new input that you haven't seen before, but try to reason about it the same way. And there's kind of 2 risks with that approach. So I'll say one, it works really well for making the LLM be consistent. But the 2 risks are, if the LLM makes a mistake, it will propagate that mistake forward. And so we kind of try to smooth over that by providing enough examples that if 1 or 2 are wrong, the error will get blurred out. But the other thing is, sometimes you don't want, you know, if you're sending sensitive data to us, you might not want one user's data being used as a few shot example for another user's input. And so in that scenario, we have a tenant key. So it's a multi-tenant system. And if you just, when you run your process, if you give us the user key, we'll make sure one user's data is never used as a few shot example for another user.
Okay. What are your main geographic markets and industries are you targeting, already active in? And also, are there any localization regulatory challenges you're facing in different regions, if we are speaking about different regions?
Yeah, I mean, we're primarily North America. And in terms of industries, we do have kind of the 4 industries. Even though we've built a horizontal platform, the 4 industries that we probably have the most headway in are e-commerce, marketing, logistics, and fintech. And a lot of those are, you know, I recently worked at a fintech company, and before that I was at a logistics company. And so some of that's just from my network. But also all of those industries are very kind of document heavy. And if you have humans kind of reading and parsing a lot of documents, there's a lot that we can do for you there. In terms of regulatory things, there's not too many. You know, we have, we're SOC 2 compliant, but we're not compliant. But we are actually very close to being HIPAA compliant, and we hadn't really prioritized it because we didn't have any customers in healthcare. But we just started getting a lot of interest from healthcare, and so HIPAA compliance is a big one. And realistically, we may be HIPAA compliant in the next month or 2. But the other thing, at least in the States, different states are starting to enact their own regulations around how AI can be used. And so, like I believe in Colorado, you can't use, or it's very difficult to use AI to make decisions around loan applications. So if you're giving, if somebody's applying for a loan from a bank, it's very difficult, nearly impossible to use an LLM in that decision because of the traceability that you need. But if you're giving a loan to a small business, it's different. So like a loan to a person is different than a loan to a small business. And so we haven't ran into that problem today. But if a bank came to us and said we want to automate loan decisions using logic, we'd probably have to scrutinize that a little bit.
Mm, I think that they might have already the automation in the loan process, not
Oh,
AI, but
yes, yeah. Oh, for sure. And at Brex, we had, I mean, a lot of these pipelines are automated, but there's more and more regulations around how interpretable the results are and how transparent the results are. And it's very difficult to meet those criteria with a large language model in your pipeline. And so practically speaking today, it would be difficult to put an LLM in the middle of a loan decision process. And so that's all I'm getting at there.
yeah. Also, you
Yeah.
mentioned that you are going to be HIPAA compliant, yeah, for the healthcare HIPAA compliant, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So as I understand, there is an interest from the medical industry, yeah, health
Yes.
industry. It's very interesting. Could you please tell a little bit about how they are going, or what their ideas are about where they could use it? It's about
Yeah.
health.
So yeah, a lot of the use cases that at least customers have ran by us aren't necessarily for diagnosing patients. It's usually maybe summarizing notes or taking physician notes and augmenting them with kind of a more friendly summary. Because sometimes the raw notes can be kind of inscrutable to a non-technical person. And so usually it's about taking something and making it easier for the patient to understand. So those are all the use cases that we've been involved with. And it's interesting that the models that we call out to, one of the reasons we do routing to different models, so we'll route to about one of a dozen models, is because for certain models like OpenAI, if you're just giving it text and getting back text, it can be HIPAA compliant. But as soon as you involve any media like an image or a PDF, OpenAI will not support HIPAA compliance anymore. But Gemini can be HIPAA compliant for media, and so one of the reasons we have this LLM routing layer is to allow us to route to different models for compliance and regulatory reasons. And then the only other, there's like a lot of subtle things with HIPAA, like in our own internal logging, we need to make sure we're not accidentally logging, customer data and things like that. And yeah, so those are the kinds of compliance things we're thinking through.
Because I think medical industry, health industry, is really perspective for the AI augmentation about doctors' assistants. OpenAI has already, as I remember, implemented several solutions to give an opportunity to implement it, so it can be created on MCP servers too. So you give an opportunity to send the requests through the MCP server, yeah, and give insights about previous visits, something like this, summarizes about previous visits and so on. I think it's really perspective direction in the AI.
Yeah, and there are some early experiments using vision models to help read X-rays, and we're seeing like very early experiments in using LLMs to be kind of more involved in the medical decisions. But I don't know, outside of kind of laboratory or experimental environments, I don't really know of many. Though I am like super hopeful, even outside of Western markets. I think making healthcare more accessible to the entire planet, it would be really helpful. So I am hopeful that LLMs get there.
Yeah, I agree. Where do you see Logic in 3-5 years?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, hopefully, 1,000 times bigger than we are today. We're still very, we're still tiny. We're 6 people. I mean, we are doing the neat thing with doing an AI startup is you have small teams that kind of have outsized impact. And so even though we're only a 6-person team, we've automated over 3 million decisions now for our customers. And we've only been around for a little over a year and a half. So, I would hope in 3 to 5 years, that number is, hundreds of billions or trillions of decisions for our customers. And I think the world in general, hopefully, at least for knowledge work, people will be spending more time on kind of complex or more interesting kind of decisions and strategy in their company. Because if we've removed all of the 30-second decisions from your day, then that just frees you up to spend time thinking on kind of deeper things that require a deeper, more concentrated level of thought. And so I think it would just be great to kind of free teams from any mundane tasks and just let them focus on the interesting things. And that's what we're trying to do.
I would like it to happen. Really.
Like
really.
even just opening an email and deciding whether or not you should respond to it, or deciding. There's so many. Now that I've been at this for a little bit, I've become really tuned to the hundreds of decisions that I do every single day over and over again that can just be automated.
And it's a big task for the mind to make decisions.
Yes.
Well, yeah. So, okay. Is there something you feel people really ask about, but you wish they did? Something behind the scenes, insights, or
yeah. Huh. Oh man. I know. After this call, I'll have a really good answer for you. Let me. A question that I wish people would ask.
Yeah, you have been talking with me. You had a lot of conversation with other people, and after all these meetings, you go home and you think, why they are not asking me about it?
Yeah. I think, this is a little bit of a different take on it, but one of the common mistakes that I see teams make is they'll get ChatGPT to do something interesting and then assume that it's really trivial to automate that. And so they'll go, grab LangChain or whatever, this is for a technical, audience. They'll go grab some agentic framework and they'll go try to wire it up and learn that the results that they get when they try to do it themselves are nowhere near as good as the results when they're sitting in front of ChatGPT. And I think I kind of just wish people were more aware of how difficult it is to operationalize an actual LLM feature, especially if there's not going to be a human in the loop, because there's at a minimum a dozen decisions that you need to make around not just the framework, but also your prompting strategies, what models you're going to route out to, how do you do evaluation, where do you log historical data for regression testing, what's your observability story, how do you expose the result of the LLM over the wire, through an API? Are you using structured output? There's a million questions that go into operationalizing an LLM, and I think for a large set of use cases, Logic automates almost all of those, and it's kind of the product that I wish we had when I was at Brex. But I think I wish a lot of people would ask, if we were to build this in-house instead of build it on top of Logic, what would you recommend? And I'd always have recommendations for them, but it's a big list. There's a lot of decisions that have to go into any LLM.
Thank you very much, Steve.
Yeah.
Steve, thank you very much for joining the podcast, sharing your ideas with us. I really appreciate your time.
This was fun.